So this evening, this is not actually going to be an intellectual class course. In fact, you don't even really have strict debate teams per se, or every man for himself. Discussing the topic of what is the role of interpretations in 21st century physics. If things get too friendly and polite, I have some more inflammatory questions I can throw in later on. So our panelists are Saunders, Ognyan, Oreshkov, Henrique, Gomes, and this guy who wandered in. And so I think Simon is going to do that for us.
Thanks very much. It's lovely to kick off this debate, especially at Wolfson College, which was my first love in Oxford. I was a Gerard here back in the 80s. I was also an undergraduate here back in the 70s. That was not my first love. Wolfson was my first love. Okay, so we've been debating about what this debate is about, and we're a bit stuck. It was at one point going to be quantum foundations, but people shied away from that, partly I think because it was thought that we don't want to have a fisticuffs about Everett versus hidden variables or something like that. Okay, so we want to do something a bit different. So I did think of things to say about interpretation in a general philosophical sense and where physics in the 21st century is going. But that's very much crystal ball gazing, and I'm not sure that I've got any particular acuity in that, and I'm not sure if you guys have either. Maybe that's not a very profitable way to spend our time. So I have actually rather thought of something slightly different, and I want to at least make my 5 or 6 minutes about an alternative motion, and a debate ought to have a motion. So I have a motion. This is a motion that the point of quantum foundations is to find an alternative and better theory to quantum mechanics in non-relativistic regime. So that's the motion, and I'm going to argue in favour of it, okay, contrary to what you might think. So the reason I'm arguing in favour of it is because it seems to me that every alternative isn't really worth having. So in other words, if you're not interested in changing quantum mechanics, already in the non-relativistic regime, then it's not really clear what to do in quantum foundations. It seems to me that the various scenarios and offers, kinds of things that one can hope to do and aspire to do, are, they're creditable, they're worthy causes, if you like, but they're not really the stuff to fire the imagination and really lead to committed engagement in serious research. Okay, so why do I think that? Well, I've been canvassing, so I spent a good couple of hours at the table just talking to people. I mean, look, this is not a terribly well-prepared talk. But the thought is this. There's 3 or 4 things that you can do in quantum foundations that are entirely creditable if you're not trying to change quantum mechanics. There's still a point to them. There's a very significant point. 1, I'm going to give a list. I'm going to give 3 or 4, and then I'll shut up. So 1 is you're interested in key concepts that seem to be under great pressure at what is, by everybody's agreement, the research threshold, quantum gravity. And we saw examples of that this morning, some lovely examples. Lucian's talk, I think, was a great example of this, where you are focusing on certain sorts of concepts that are of great interest, like general covariance, or background independence, perhaps another way of putting it, although Lucian didn't put it in those terms, or the conflict between determinism and probabilism, between GR and QM. So you take key concepts and you try to investigate them in a simplified setting. And a simplified setting is typically non-relativistic quantum theory. So I think that's an absolutely admirable thing to do, and those of you who are doing it and who are happy and content with doing it, I don't really have a quarrel. But I don't really believe that's what most of you think you're doing. I don't entirely believe that. To give another example, reparameterization invariance, which leads as one of the aspects to the problem of time and quantum gravity, we can study that in the non-relativistic domain. And people have done that. Again, a creditable thing to do, but is it somehow enough? I don't quite buy it. So another thing that's a creditable thing to do is to strip down quantum mechanics. Try to find some impoverished version of it, or some more general version of it, not so constrained, perhaps with less mathematical input, constrained perhaps by much more general constraints than are adequate, sufficient to give you quantum theory, and see what sorts of phenomena can you account for, what can't you account for. Okay, so that, again, it sounds good, and it's a creditable thing to try to do, up to a point. So here's the negative. The negative is this. And you've got to look at yourself, you know, in a funding application, and you're looking at someone who's very sceptical and says to you, so you want money in order to look at worse theories in quantum theory to see where they go wrong. It's not very inspiring. Okay, it doesn't really do it somehow. Okay, is there a third thing to do, a fourth thing to do? Well, quantum computing, of course, is an amazing and wonderful and extraordinary thing to try to do, and to carry it through. Fantastic. If you're all working on quantum algorithms for quantum computing, amazing, terrific, fantastic. I'm not sure that you are. A challenge. You can correct me. You know, what do I know? You know, please tell me if I'm wrong. In a way, I think this might be the fun bit of the debate. What do you think you're doing that is important? What's important? Okay. So quantum computing, sure, it's important. I mean, if for nothing else, for quantum cryptography and so forth. I mean, for heaven's sake, the Chinese have got a satellite up doing something or other. There must be big money in it. Fine, fine. Okay. Here's a fourth thing to do. Okay, the fourth thing to do is to become very interested in questions like this, and this was just put to me tonight, and it was a delightful question, and I love it. And the question is this: why is quantum unreasonableness reasonable? Did I get it wrong? Did I get it wrong? No, it wasn't
The
right.
reasonable unreasonableness.
Explain the reasonable unreasonableness of quantum mechanics.
That's not mine, by the way.
No, it was just put to me, and I think it's a lovely idea, and I'm with it, and I'm running with it, and I'm hugging it and holding it, and you know. But the trouble is this: for me to understand the question is already a lot, to be honest with you. In order to get to the point where you start to see what is unreasonable in quantum mechanics as being reasonable, and to see that as something that needs to be explained, I'm reminded of nothing so much as philosophy. Philosophy for you uninitiates. I don't include everybody in this room, please. Philosophy generates its own internal reasons to be interested in something. And those things could be almost anything. It could be arithmetic, it could be, you know, statement forms in speech, it could be issues to do with the mind, it could be quantum physics. So philosophy has its own reasons to get interested in things. And once it's got interested in things, it can come out with, you know, really important and significant and interesting answers. So philosophy, in case any of you don't know this, in the last 50 years has made fantastic discoveries. Incredible, huge. But I can't actually explain to you what they are, because in order for you to understand what they are, I have to get you to understand a whole lot of philosophical questions that philosophers have found puzzling for a very long time. And by the time I've done that, you'd probably be bored and falling asleep and everything. So this is a worry. So it could be that what quantum foundations people do is that they're getting so involved in quantum theory, non-relativistic. All of this is rather important when I'm talking about non-relativistic, because of course, as soon as you start talking about relativistic quantum theory or gravity or something like that, then obviously there's new fundamental research that needs to be done. So I'm talking about non-relativistic. So I can well believe that through finding new ways to think about non-relativistic quantum mechanics, one comes up with new questions that have subtle and sophisticated and complicated answers, and even valuable answers once you've engaged in the questioning. So this is just like philosophy, and maybe that's where quantum foundations is going. I don't know. It doesn't quite seem to me to have the grab that it seemed to have, quantum foundations. So I put it to you. The only reason to take quantum foundations as something to do with fervent passion and desire and excitement in the heat of making new and fundamental discoveries is because you want to change quantum mechanics. Because all of the alternatives don't really stand up. I argued for the motion. I both set the motion and argued in favour of it. So normally one would have the other side would argue against it, but because we didn't agree on a motion,
So
make up your own.
You know, there are two things that I wanted to put there to you. So first, I don't think that problems in quantum mechanics are just, in a certain sense, some closed space problem philosophically that you create because you like to think about it. I think there are deep problems in it, and that's why many very famous and very prolific physicists keep coming back to it. I mean, you have Toft, who's worried about this for a large part of his career. Weinberg, also a very accomplished physicist, comes back to it. And I think even very accomplished physicists are not satisfied. There's always something that you can't quite put your finger on that still bothers most working physicists about, well, I shouldn't say that. It bothers some portion of working physicists about quantum mechanics. The other thing that I wanted to put is that maybe, you know, to make really sense of non-relativistic quantum mechanics to the satisfaction of these people, you actually do need to take into account hints from quantum gravity. Even if you're not finding a full theory of quantum gravity, there are certain things that show up only when you talk about quantum gravity that could inform your approach to quantum mechanics, even non-relativistic ones. So, for instance, for instance, the in many approaches, the non-existence of time, or the timelessness of quantum gravity, some people advocate for, that would bring about, at least in my view, fundamental changes to quantum mechanics. That you need to talk about, you know, what is now a transition amplitude if you don't have time. How do you describe these things in relational manners, and what do they mean? I think there is a traffic going the other way as well. But you wouldn't find out these insights if you just looked at non-relativistic quantum mechanics.
I don't think it's supposed to be us addressing each other, is it? But if it is, I just want to point out that Stephen Weinberg's article in the New York Times, everybody's read it? January,
New York Review of Books.
New York Review of Books. Really made the point that he had always thought debates about quantum foundations was like debates about action at a distance in the 17th century, and people would eventually just get used to the weirdness of quantum mechanics, and that would be it. And late in his life, he's come to the view that, well, maybe this just isn't going away. But the implication is that maybe we need to change quantum mechanics.
Right.
Yeah, but that's what I come back to. That's my motion.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Right. But
well, I don't know if I agree with the motion, but it depends on what sense you mean you want to change it. You actually want to have... Yeah, so that's another question. Do you want to just change interpretation of formalism, or do you actually want to do something like Weinberg, that you have experimental changes?
My suggestion is that the only... And I'm expecting people to oppose me here. I'm not expecting everyone to go along with this. The creditable project, the ambitious project of quantum foundations is to change quantum mechanics. Now, I'm a committed Everettian. I don't think there's any problem coming from the problem of measurement. And I don't see any other basis on which to think there's a problem with quantum mechanics. So don't get me wrong, I'm not with you. I'm not with you. Okay, but it seems to me that if you're in quantum foundations, I think the creditable way to be in quantum foundations is to change quantum. I'm not sure how else to be in quantum foundations, other than do these other things, creditable, but not really enough.
But personally, I never saw any use in Everett, but I just discovered a big use in Everett. The fact that actually the position you make is actually a result from Everett to say we have to change quantum mechanics. That's a very constructive sort of view.
Wrong. It's because of Everett. There's nothing left for quantum foundations to do.
Oh, so just what you mean, like my
my little speech.
Although this is not
So I mean, yeah, I can immediately pick up.
You don't have to respond.
No. You mean do I have to respond or say my 5 minutes?
Normally debaters address the audience rather than
Yeah. So I
each
just
other.
can pick up with mine because that sort of picks up exactly on the sort of conversation we just had. So I did my PhD in the 90s, and I did my PhD in quantum foundations directly. Like my PhD, probably most people don't know that I ever did anything like that. It was an interpretation, contextual hidden variable interpretations, to which extent you could actually model stuff, and I mean, pretty much nobody cared about whatever I did. Okay? So but things didn't go terribly wrong in the end, but it doesn't matter. So, and when I went to conferences in the 90s, it was literally like, okay, you didn't have that many Everettians, but you had Bohemians, you had modal people, you had like the GRW people, you had some other people, and they were arguing, and there was a conference. People were just arguing, nothing was really happening. People were just arguing, and then you did your PhD in such a subject, you applied for a postdoc. No, you didn't apply for a postdoc because there was no postdocs. There was nothing. It was just the end of the career. Okay, that was it. There was no jobs anymore. So it's a fairly frustrating situation. And so I think the main, I mean, there's nothing wrong with interpretation. I think the main problem was, what does interpretation mean? And at that time, interpretation meant like joining one of the available political parties, which was like being, Everettian was fairly small, I think, at the time, being Bohemian,
just
being,
me.
it was fairly small, it was being Bohemian, being this, or being this. And if you didn't join, you were sort of an outcast. Like if you now go to some religious countries, like, and you're an atheist, then basically a chop of your head, like, it's okay whatever you are, but as long as you're nothing, if you're nothing, then you're out. But I mean, I'm going back to the sort of kind of thing we agreed on last night as a topic for discussion. So what is the role of interpretation of the 21st century? And I think it should be all about interpretation, but not interpretation in the sense of political parties and you join one or you don't join one. So I think we should get rid of these political parties, and I very much like what Simon was just saying, like I'm an Everettian, and now I decided that this is what we should do. We should change quantum mechanics, because that's actually really what should happen, I think. So how are we going to do it? And I think we're going to do it through interpretation, not the sort of old-fashioned idea of interpretation, but we just should ask the new right questions. So I think the whole idea of interpretation basically came from John von Neumann, like, because he started, I mean, he wrote the book like Mathematical Foundations of Quantum Mechanics, or whatever it was called, and it was all about like, this is measurement and how should we think about measurement. He came up with the collapsible slit, and then most of the idea of what interpretation means was about what is the measurement problem, and that was the only question asked. What is the measurement problem? People came up with all these things, and interpretation really meant nothing else but what is the measurement problem. Now there's a lot of other questions you can ask about quantum mechanics, about the fundamental concepts. I mean, I'm just going to throw out one, which is obviously something I've cared about for a while. Like, should we care about states? Not what is the quantum state, but should we even care about the existence of states in the quantum formalism versus say, no, the world is about processes. Now, this is not a very new thought, you know, like the pre-Socratics were thinking about like that, like people, how do you say this in English? Parmenides, Heraclitus, what are the English names?
Parmenides.
Okay, that's good. so these people were thinking about this thing. Should we care about like the idea of that you have sort of a constant representation of something that is, because that's really what interpretation has been all about, or should we just totally forget about the idea there is even something like a state, and think about, yeah, like stuff is just going on and the main idea is process, which gives a much more different idea, like the things like Lucian was representing this morning is very much in that picture. You've got sort of things going on, and then you have to figure out ways to talk about things going on. You don't have this safe sofa of a state anymore. I'm sitting on a state, that's where I am. So that's the safe like sofa that everybody has been sitting on for a long time in interpretation. Just we got our state, and okay, let's look at our state. Oh, things go wrong if we look at our state. Okay, now we got a measurement problem. If you take away the state, the measurement problem doesn't even exist as a question. I don't say the problem is gone, but the question is sort of totally gone as something as being formulated now. So that's one idea. So other question would be, what are the fundamental, I mean this is sort of like logic, what are the fundamental connectives or ingredients in a physical theory? Nothing to do with the measurement problem. It's like Lucian was putting some stuff on which is very close to what we are thinking, like these ideas of like compositionality or decompositionality or the ability to identify regions in space in some way. I mean, von Neumann also had ideas like that. Like he had, for a short time, the idea that logic would probably play some role in physics. Like he went away from that a long time, but that's like a valid question. Like, is logic like a valid thing in physics? I mean, actually, I don't know, but I'm supposed to be a professor of logic, and I don't even know what logic means these days. I don't know the word. I don't understand the word. So that makes actually the question more interesting. Is there some stuff which we maybe use to identify as logic, which plays some role in physics? So these are, for me, the interpretational questions we should start to ask, and people have started to ask stuff like that. Ludwig thought in the 60s that maybe probabilities were fundamental in theories of physics. I don't believe anything about that. I know, like John Barrett, for example, believes that stuff. I don't believe John Barrett.
Believe in John Barrett.
I mean, we agree actually. We agree about a lot of stuff actually, most stuff actually. Just saying, like this has been fairly dominant in the sort of things Simon is talking about, going beyond quantum theory, like focus on probabilities. I don't believe at all that that's the way to go, but that's a belief. Like, I mean, personally, I think like things which are actually much closer to how humans develop. Like, what are the first things we develop? We think about first things we develop, and I've been talking about developmental psychologists about that, is like a very, very primitive notion of topology and connectedness. So our program I've been trying to formulate the last 10 years is about just thinking about something like a very primitive baby notion of connectedness, and can we formulate the whole of physics in those terms. So I think that's a sort of role of interpretation for the next century, like coming up with new paradigms and trying to follow them, and it should be philosophically inspired, because I don't think you can do science if you're not philosophically inspired. I think a lot of things went terribly wrong in the previous century because of the stupid shut up and calculate paradigm, so we should stick to interpretation. I don't think anything useful is going to happen otherwise, but we should change the concept of interpretation. It should be, interpretation, we should just drop the word and basically replace it by like, yeah, what, you know what I'm saying? You've got a word? You're a philosopher. We should use our brain. We should use our brain. Anyway, that's we should use our brains. Like not just our mathematical skills, because anyway, the AIs and all those things, they're gonna outperform us anyway, like in the next couple of weeks. Okay, that's it.
Well, I guess everything I was imagining I might talk about was mentioned in different ways, and I guess I'll just try to say it in my own way, and you'll disagree with different points here. So I don't know, I mean, as far as interpretation is concerned, I mean, first of all, in order to say anything precise, I immediately run into the problem of defining interpretation, which can be subject to many interpretations and all this, and this runs into philosophy. I really admire how philosophers are able to navigate through all these different definitions and meanings. So I'll try to keep it at some kind of intuitive level. And like I roughly can distinguish two types of notions of interpretation. One is where you're really concerned with making some kind of ontological commitment. And another one, which Lucian Hardy called interpretation in inverted commas today in his talk, is a kind of more, he called it a methodology or an attitude in some way, approach, thinking about quantum theory, I'm really, really fond of this kind of approach, which you talked about. It's an operational way of thinking. And this is something that I believe would definitely have implication for physics in the 21st century. Of course, when we speak about physics in the 21st century, we all think about some of the biggest open problems, such as quantum gravity, one of the biggest questions in theoretical physics. And indeed, I side with many people around the opinion that through deeper understanding of quantum theory, its meaning, we could make progress in this direction. I think we are already seeing certain ideas and results that open new ways in this direction. So this also is, I believe, in line with what Bob Coecke just said, that we need a kind of perhaps new notion of interpretation, because it is an interpretation in a certain way, and yet you're not, it is compatible with different ontological commitments. And it may actually inform us about ultimately arriving with some satisfactory ontological understanding of quantum theory. Now, I understand that there are people here who believe that this problem has been solved in the non-relativistic case. I do not necessarily agree with that. I still feel there is something bothering, as Henrique said, it's bothering about a significant fraction of physicists. I think every physicist is in a way bothered, really, but not every physicist works on that. So I think there is something more to be understood there. But we already have seen, how through trying to understand in operational terms the meaning. Okay, I'm okay with even trying to understand the notion of state. Well, yes, I believe that there is a more general paradigm, as you know. I myself am working on developing such a thing. And yet, within this paradigm, you can make sense of the old notion of state, if you like, but making sense of it in a careful way, going back to the origin of the concept, because at the end of the day, it came out of experimental observations and thinking about stuff going on and things we observe. You can gain some insights into the structure of quantum theory, as many people around have done, like people who work on reconstructions that tell us how we can go beyond, what axioms we could relax, what does a state even mean. Is it really enough to talk about a state, as Bob said, just a state at a given time just encapsulates everything, the state of the universe? With the work of Ludwig that was mentioned, for me it became clear that actually, conceptually, there are two things. There are states and there are effects. And so it does not seem appropriate to me to try to, encapsulate everything in just the state of the universe as such. There is always the two things that come together in order to make predictions and talk about probabilities. Probabilities might not be, as Bob said, the thing we should care about, but at least until now they've seemed to play a very important role in quantum theory, and this is how we understand quantum theory as a predictive theory, I believe. We can debate that. And so I'm deeply convinced that through this operational interpretation, we can make progress in both deeper understanding of the ontology as well as towards new physics that we have to discover. So that's all I have to say, I guess.
So I wanted to pick up first from something that Bob said, and we were actually discussing this now. And this goes back to what he said about Heraclitus and Parmenides, and what if the world is just process? And as Neo pointed out here, well, doesn't it need to be a process between states, between things? To which Bob had another answer, but I'm not going to comment because it doesn't serve my purpose. But to start that discussion, I wanted to quote a nice paragraph by Bob Wald and Bill Unruh in a paper they wrote together in '89. So for those of you who don't know, Unruh is really an icon. Both are really icons in quantum gravity in general and general relativity in particular. So the quote goes as follows. In quantum mechanics, all measurements are made at instants of time. Only quantities referring to the instantaneous state of a system have physical meaning. In particular, histories, under quotes, are unmeasurable in quantum theory. On the other hand, in general relativity, time is merely an arbitrary label. The physically meaningful quantities must be independent of such labels. In other words, only the space-time geometry is measurable, i.e., only histories have physical meaning. Thus, it should not be surprising that when one naively combines quantum theory and general relativity, the only meaningful quantities which survive are those which are both instantaneously measurable and yet depend only on the full history, or only on the space-time geometry. So, I think that's puzzling. Right? Huh?
I think it's completely wrong. But anyway, go on.
So I'm going back to something that I said to Simon, that I think that our approach to quantum gravity can actually inform our approach to quantum mechanics. Because in gravity, when you want to formulate things as we usually understand them in quantum mechanics, you want to understand one instantaneous state as being somehow physical instantaneous state, as being somehow going into another physical instantaneous state. But the problem is that physical, here, for gravity, doesn't have any meaning for instantaneous observables. And so, first of all, I think that is a deep problem for quantum gravity and something that we need to resolve going forward. And I also think that can inform even our classical models. I think there are other clues that we can take going forward, and this also goes in line with modifying quantum mechanics, but I think perhaps what we want to do is actually modify, in a certain sense, the interpretation of our classical systems if we want to have them mesh with quantum gravity. So here's a distinction that most people don't talk about. In quantum gravity, when you write down quantum gravity in a 3+1 formula, so in you want to evolve a system, it is not true that this evolution actually corresponds to, well, maybe I'm going too technical here. Yeah? Do you think I should? Okay. So usually in quantum gravity, as they said, you have a whole space-time, and you can put these arbitrary labels everywhere that will foliate the space-time. They will tell you what are these surfaces of constant time, these instants, right? The problem with quantum gravity is that it's part of the symmetries of the theory that you can actually translate these labels up and down. And that is a bit strange, because you're taking an instantaneous state to another instantaneous state later, and you're saying that's part of the symmetry of the theory. So you're, in a sense, you're identifying these states. They're all under the same umbrella of observable systems. And so I think that, in fact, we should take that clue to look at more numerically based gravitational approaches. So how do people look at gravitational collapse or gravitational waves and that sort of thing? They usually do a dynamical approach to gravity. And in dynamical approaches to gravity, you actually have to forgo of the usual Lorentz symmetry everywhere, in a certain sense. You don't forgo it in an absolute sense, but you find out a solution of the system from initial values, and you evolve. And there you can have different types of symmetries, and you can have a space-time emerge from those initial values and how you produce that. So in a sense, Lorentz symmetry can be an emergent thing, where you have the full space-time. And I think if you really want to make sense of quantum gravity, I think it perhaps is the case that not you should modify quantum mechanics, but you should modify gravity. you should say, well, yes, it has Lorentz symmetry, but it's not fundamental, it's not kinematical. It only exists after you have a solution of your space-time in the background. If you have a classical solution of space-time or of the gravitational degrees of freedom behave in a certain way, then you can talk about Lorentz symmetry, but not before that. You shouldn't impose Lorentz symmetry also on the gravity side. You should only impose it on a gravitational background. So I'm just contraposing a little bit of what Simon was saying, that you should use the interpretational problems to modify quantum mechanics. I think you can modify without really modifying gravity. In a certain sense, this is already, what I'm describing is already in a certain sense an initial value approach to gravity, where in fact you have indications that different symmetry principles are at hand there. And yeah, so I think going into the 21st century to try to connect it back, perhaps we shouldn't put up Lorentz symmetry in a pedestal, at least not before we find, we solve the equations of motion, we find classical backgrounds for gravity.
I was wondering if I understand the problem. Are you suggesting that there is no need to modify quantum theory? We need to modify the way we think about formulating dynamics within it, or symmetries, how we think of symmetries within it, but within this one that we already have from...
Right. I think there are interpretations of quantum mechanics, like conditional probabilities interpretation, which is basically just relational. It's saying you find a transition amplitude between two instantaneous states that are given relationally. And I think that is already compatible with other views of GR, of these other initial value views of general relativity. So I think, in a certain sense, you don't need to dig that deep into modifying quantum mechanics if you have a different view of timeless classical gravity.
Well, I think in terms of symmetry, perhaps Simon should have a right
Oh,
reply
well,
there. But after that,
I
if anyone would like to
everybody should
contribute.
have a go. Come on, let people go. We've had our go.
Please go ahead.
Hello. This is maybe a kind of a response to Simon, in that I see the main things that you want to do with quantum foundations for me is to try and explain what quantum mechanics is to someone who doesn't know anything about it. So I go into schools and I can do that with relativity, because there is a clear sort of like message of what relativity is about, but I find it very, very difficult with quantum mechanics. And often one thing that I use is Bell's theorem, and I don't see Bell as trying to modify quantum mechanics. I see him as trying to unpick and understand what the message of quantum mechanics is about, so that we can see it more clearly. And I don't know how that fits in with your definition of what quantum foundation is.
I think that's totally admirable. I would be surprised if that is a motivation for most physicists, that they go into the discipline in order to understand. Correct me if I'm wrong, but normally with a field the idea is to make some substantive progress, and the idea that progress would be constituted by deepening understanding. The only field where I know that that's true is philosophy.
No, I mean, you're wrong. The only field where it has been true for centuries is physics. It's just that last century physics became a bit stupid. So it's not. It's a temporary thing, I would say. It's a temporary thing. It's a wrong thing. It's a wrong thing. It's a wrong thing.
No, hang on, Bob. I really put this to you as a challenge. Name one significant figure in physics whose primary motivation was to understand extant theory.
You mean when?
At any time. Just give me one example of a major physicist whose primary motivation, all that they wanted to do was to understand extant physics rather than to add to it, to change it, to do something novel and new. Can you give me an example? I mean,
Wait. You put an additional constraint. You said they're not allowed to do something new.
No, the
Clearly, Kepler was trying to understand stuff. It was
he
in
was
crazy
trying to
ways.
understand phenomena.
It was in
but-
crazy ways, but he wanted to
He
understand.
was trying to understand the starry sky. You know,
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the world. Yes,
And
but,
he associated it with
but-
music
but
and
this was
stuff.
not. But this was to understand quantum mechanics, to understand an existing theory, and I'm just not sure that has ever been a significant motivation for any major physicist ever. I do applaud it. I do it too. It's all I do.
John Bell, not an example.
Yeah.
John Bell. No, John Bell was very explicit about it. This is my holiday work. This isn't my serious job. My serious job is in CERN, where I'm involved, engaged in this, extraordinary enterprise of high-energy particle physics. He was very clear about that. What he was doing in Foundations was, really his part-time sort of hobby.
I think you're very.
Hang on, but okay, if your goal is what people do 9 to 5, then I think quantum mechanics is remarkable to the extent that you have literally 60 years worth of people working full time to do literally nothing else but cash up the implications of 4 or 5 postulates about Hilbert spaces that were derived in the 1930s. Like the entire field of quantum information is literally understanding what's already there. Right? I mean, the fact that you can teleport things or do cryptography what was discovered in that century has taken at least 50 years to even begin to understand the implications of it.
Yes.
So I would say
Good.
interpretations are for a lot of us, are our hobby. I don't know if that's our motivation, like emotionally why we became physicists.
No.
This is what we do every day.
Right.
All we're doing is understanding existing quantum
I
physics.
don't know if it's true, right? It's what is understanding in which sense.
Look,
Not changing
It's
it,
using
not advocating changing a postulate or something, for instance. Right.
Maybe just applying to some calculations what is understanding
Yeah, so I
in
said that's
better
understanding.
calculations.
What does it mean to understand is what you're asking.
No, to understand quantum mechanics in the sense of trying to see hidden implications of
Yeah, so I said that's working on existent theory. I think that's what a lot of us do, right?
I still want to clarify.
I mean,
Simon, can you clarify your question? You're really saying, who cares about understanding without trying to change?
I'm not being dismissive. You really don't get me wrong. I see I've set up a lot of confusions, and I apologise for them. I mean, first confusion is I was taking the role of a debate quite seriously. I'm prepared to debate many motions that I don't believe in. And I did say this. I don't believe in this motion. And I expect people to resist it. I don't expect you all to be happy to be cast into the role of either you change quantum mechanics or what you're doing isn't worth doing. I don't expect you to be happy with that. Some of you will be happy with that, those of you who do want to change quantum mechanics. But I think many of you don't see it in that way, so fine. So then I'm looking at alternative things that you could be doing. And they're all sort of worthy things to do, but I'm not sure that they have the importance of fundamental research.
But why can't
That's my
trying to understand something?
And I'm talking about non-relativistic quantum mechanics.
Right, but
I'm not talking about quantum gravity.
trying to understand it be the first step to modify. I mean,
Yes.
it
No,
often is.
quite. No, that's my point.
Perhaps
So if that's my motion, that the only way to do quantum foundations, non-relativistic quantum foundations, with the sense of doing something fundamental, is if you're trying to change quantum mechanics. And I don't get it otherwise, is my way. I admire those, and I'm with you to try to understand it better. I'll devote my life to it. But I'm a philosopher.
there's also mathematics. There's also mathematics.
For me, what I've observed, like the transition from the previous century to this century is exactly that's what happened. Previous century, people were debating. This century, most people I know, like who are doing quantum foundations, they're actually trying to change quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
And I remember Lee Smalling saying, who totally believes quantum mechanics is right, like that I believe quantum mechanics is right, but it seems that the people who are doing the most interesting things are the ones who disagree with me and are thinking that quantum mechanics is wrong. Pointing at the new quantum foundation generation of this century. Because you know the generation I'm talking about. And and they're all trying to change quantum mechanics. So we're all doing that. And so I completely agree with what you say. That
Then my motion will be carried unanimously.
I totally agree with what you say.
So the only thing I don't get, Simon, is why you insist on non-relativistic quantum
no,
theory. I mean,
not.
it seems that the really interesting questions are in this clash between general relativity and quantum theory, and I mean, maybe people in quantum foundations haven't tackled those questions before, but we should be doing so. And if you want to change quantum theory, the most promising route to doing that is exactly by looking at issues that come from quantum gravity.
Absolutely.
But other than that qualification you put in, which I thought was unnecessary, I very much agreed with the with motion Saunders.
With the motion, right.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
right, right.
so Lucian, you yourself did the same thing. You say, I want to go to quantum gravity. First, I have to come back to plain basic quantum mechanics and try to understand it better, which you did a few years ago, and then you went back.
Well, I wouldn't say I fully did that a few years ago, but
Yeah, you
Yeah,
know what I'm
but
saying.
absolutely,
So
I
when you
think
did
that-
you reformulated, and
Yeah.
then
I mean, I think, but I went through a process. There was, back in the terrible 90s, there were these conferences on quantum foundations that you talked about, and the last such conference, which will remain nameless, I went to, was in 2002, I think, and people sat around and debated about different interpretations, and then everyone went home, and I felt profoundly depressed after that. I mean, as a physicist, not as a human, but it was because there was no progress made, and I'd been to the same conference 10 years earlier, the same debate, no progress had happened, and then I went to a different conference where people were talking about these new sorts of ideas, this quantum information-inspired approach to physics, to quantum foundations, and it felt like something was really happening, and there was progress, and there was a momentum, and I think that's continued to happen. But for that momentum to continue into the future, we have to tackle new physics. We have to tackle, well, most probably that will be quantum gravity. It could be something else, but in order to change the course of physics with these sorts of ideas, we've really got to tackle those ideas head on. And that's the challenge that we face, I would say.
No, I think that's magnificent. I'm completely with you, but I'm not sure that that's what the Quantum Foundations community does. The Quantum Foundation, and look, I really may be wrong, but it seems to me that the Quantum Foundations community is primarily preoccupied with non-relativistic quantum mechanics.
But that's changing, and I think it should continue to change. I think that let's look and see what the situation is in another 5 years, and see more and more people are getting interested in these kinds of questions.
Okay, but look, let's not be light-hearted about it. One of the driving forces of Quantum Foundations, and the reason why it's been able to work as a community and get money, is quantum information.
Absolutely.
So, quantum information is kind of non-relativistic.
Simon,
Kind of.
there's a lot of people who are, let's say, mostly concerned with the certain core of quantum theory, by which I mean complex Hilbert spaces and density matrices and the Born rule and, let's say, unitary transformations, without including extra things like the commutation relation for position and momentum, or the specific form of the Hamiltonian for the Standard Model, or things like that. I don't think it's quite right to characterise that as non-relativistic quantum theory. It's just the core part that is common to all quantum theories, be it the non-relativistic theory of particles or the relativistic theory of fields or string theory or whatever. So there's a lot of people focusing, doing foundations on that core part. Maybe one could argue that they're therefore not bringing in much general relativity, let's say, and then they ought to, or something like that. But I don't think it's quite right to say they're doing non-relativistic quantum theory.
That's a very interesting. I accept that, and I think that's an interesting way to think about what Quantum Foundations is. That it isn't actually particularly any energy regime or any particular domain. It's more playing with. I don't know how to put it. I don't want to use the words. You guys should be. Is it dealing with certain core concepts, trying to explore them in almost a domain-independent way? Would that be
Yes.
would that be a way of putting it? Well, I mean, if anything comes out of this debate such that one might actually think better what quantum foundations is, I will feel magnificently proud of myself.
I mean, let me mention some empirical evidence which came as a surprise to me today. So we set up a Quantum Foundations conference today. We had 3 talks, and every talk mentioned field theory, and all 3. Like, I mean, 2 were like hardcore about field theory and gravity. 1 was sort of giving ideas towards that. So, I mean, that wasn't planned. That's just what happened. So something is happening in that direction. I think it's going on for a while. Like a number of people here in the room, like we got a new grant. We are sort of hardcore quantum foundation. It's all about like gravity and causal structure. So I think the community is evolving. I think Lucian has been pushing this idea for a long time, that quantum foundations people should go into gravity. And I think, yeah, that's the way to go. And because the gravity people are fucking up anyway.
Does this work in computer science? Does this work in computer science?
Well, you know, like we've got the biggest quantum foundations group in the world, in computer science.
I know.
So we can do anything. We can do anything.
You can do
we
anything.
Can do anything.
Yeah, so I second Saunders' motion, even if he doesn't believe in it himself. But I'm sort of interested in what brings everybody to the room, because I don't know how many conferences there'll be in classical mechanics foundations this year, you know, there probably are questions to answer there, but I mean, if anyone's like me, they became interested in this field because they learned quantum mechanics as an undergrad, and something just stuck in their throat about it. Now, maybe that's not true for everybody, and they just think quantum mechanics is great, and it's actually at the point where they try to reconcile it with gravity that they suddenly think that there's a problem. I think that comes to the nub of what you're saying, Simon, about whether it's non-relativistic or relativistic quantum mechanics. That's the sticking point here. But I thought I'd put that to the panel. What is wrong with quantum mechanics? There must be something wrong with it if we're debating the foundations of it. So that's to you guys.
What's wrong with it?
Well, hold on. I mean, we debate foundations of thermodynamics, statistical mechanics.
I agree with you, yeah, but without such urgency, maybe as.
Moderator.
You need to face the other way.
Actually, half is right. How do you get
Moderator, please.
I just wanted to
Keep your eye on everybody.
I wanted to pick up something that Simon said. I'm not sure he really believes it, but I can think of a number of physicists, important physicists, who have thought very hard about the foundations of quantum mechanics, and I'm not absolutely sure that they were thinking about changing Escher-Perez, Nicholas Chazin, Adrian Kent, just to mention 3. These are people who worked very, very hard to understand quantum mechanics. I mean, to what extent the ultimate theme is to change it, I'm not sure. But this brings me back to another issue that Simon raised about what is a philosopher and what is a physicist. I feel very, very strongly, although Simon and I and a group of us in the philosophy faculty are in a philosophy faculty, we're engaged in an enterprise that John Bell would have recognized. We're interested in understanding physics. It may involve, in some distant sense, changing it may not. We're trying to understand basic concepts of physics. We're trying to understand how they fit into the history of physics. We're trying to understand, to some extent, how they fit into great ideas in philosophy. But the difference between us and people like Escher-Perez, it seems to me, is just a difference in degree, not a difference in kind. And I don't see that just because I'm in a philosophy department, I have to categorize myself. Oh, I'm a philosopher. I'm not interested in changing anything. I'm only interested in understanding things. There are a lot of physicists who are in the same boat. Now, does that in some sense delegitimize what we do? I don't think so. I don't think so. Most of us have spent a great deal of time just trying to come to terms with what what quantum mechanics is about. And I think that's a very, very important subject. And I think, of course, I also work in the foundation of space-time theories and gravity and so on. I have the feeling that if we understand better what we mean by the quantum, and if we understand better what we mean in about space-time, we will get a better understanding of what eventually we can think of as quantum gravity, but we're not there yet. But do we have to be so ambitious as to think we're changing physics? I'm not so sure.
Just to add one point to what you say, physics versus philosophy, like most of today happen in the computer science department.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I missed two of the talks, so forgive me if this has been covered, but I've heard the word quantum gravity quite a lot, but I haven't heard any reference to classical gravity. So I wondered if any of you had anything to comment on that. Classical gravity. So I'm an experimentalist. And we're working on an experiment to test the predictions of classical charm gravity. So if the gravitational force is purely classical, what would you expect to see? And I wonder how this would change the debate if we considered that.
Since it's about interpretation, I wonder if there is any issue about concerning interpretation of classical gravity that your experiment.
Depends on the nature of the experiment.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Yeah, what is it?
So it's a theory, we're working with Gerald Milban. He has two other authors, which I can't remember the names of, but I can send you the paper if you want. So they model the gravitational force as the classical measurement channel. So basically each atom measures the positions of the atoms around it. Those position measurements cause momentum diffusion, which leads to a heating rate, and also decoherence in the position basis. So experimentally you expect to not be able to measure large superpositions, which is really difficult because it's difficult to prepare them. But you also expect a small heating rate, which for our setup is slightly easier to measure. We're still a long way off, we're just putting bounds on it. But I just wonder how it would change the debate if we start considering how quantum mechanics would be if gravity was purely classical and we didn't need a theory of quantum gravity.
Adrian gave a talk, the first part of your talk.
Yeah, I missed two talks.
Yeah, I mean, but a quick answer is that it's absolutely central. I mean, that's a fantastic and interesting question. But I think the truth of it, you've got four people here who have got four different motions, and I'm the only one who came out with what my motion was, you know, so we've each got different slants in it. But my focus was specifically on those people who weren't particularly interested in gravity, who were just interested in non-relativistic quantum mechanics, quantum information. And I take the rebuke from Jonathan, I do take the rebuke that this is perhaps a polarizing way of framing what the training is of someone in quantum foundations. So if you're moving to gravity, you're looking at interface between gravity and quantum, that's absolutely fundamental, there's no question about it, and anybody working in that area is interested in fundamental new discoveries, absolutely. I don't think anybody here would disagree with that.
Yes, I could add that, I mean, I agree that to the extent that obviously many physicists are interested in new discoveries, I also believe that they are interested in understanding, and I think that they are driven, again, often by some puzzle. I think that, and people who are interested in foundations, even without trying to go beyond going towards quantum gravity or new theories, I mean, they're trying to just put the pieces together because you have probabilities, interpretations of probabilities, problems with that. How do you make it compatible with quantum theory, which is a probabilistic theory? I mean, there are many, it's not just the measurement problem per se that just raises questions. I mean, people are trying to understand that there are many puzzles. There are arrows of time. How does this relate to, how does links between thermodynamics, information theory, and quantum mechanics? We just don't feel we have the full understanding. So I see it as a completely legitimate goal of many physicists to actually just try to fill these gaps, because really there are disconnects. And one example of a disconnect is, of course, quantum theory and general relativity. And we are speaking about new discoveries, perhaps this seems like an obvious area where we may expect them, but I think as discoveries often happen in physics, they could come out of any new understanding that we may be able to achieve. So, yeah, it's just an addition to the, I mean, it's true that physicists are drawn kind of by the big prize in a way, but it's like even understanding and filling the gap, that there are these puzzles that drive, I believe. At least speaking for me, but I believe that's common to.
Right, so can I ask, since I'm a little bit of an outsider, although I'm very interested in the field, it seems to me there might be an asymmetry between interpretations of quantum mechanics, and I think this is going to cause some controversy, but it seems to me that Everetians, many of them don't think there is any puzzle with the measurement problem and so on and so forth. It is other communities that don't agree with their arguments, but they also don't think that they have the right arguments. So, first of all, do you think that's a fair assessment, that there is this asymmetry?
Well, I think that, speaking as an Everetian, okay, there isn't a problem with the problem of measurement, but there's untold open questions about microscopic ontology. I mean, it's a huge and open field, as I see it. But it isn't, I think, driven by the sense that quantum mechanics must change.
So when you talk about microscopic ontology, you're not talking about quantum gravity. You're talking about
No. I'm just talking about everything is on the non-relativistic level. As soon as we involve gravity or even high-energy particle physics, it's very obvious that there's a boundary at which we are trying to push for new physics. So it becomes very simple and straightforward. What I am curious about, and it was only tonight, by the way, this isn't a sort of thought-out position that I've had for months or years, is that it sort of strikes me that it's not obvious to me as a philosopher looking at different sciences, different special sciences, different communities, different disciplines, what foundations of quantum theory focused on non-relativistic, focused on non-relativistic theory is really trying to do if it isn't to change quantum mechanics.
I don't think quantum foundations community is focused anymore on non-relativistic stuff.
Well,
I think it's. This is sociological. This is this is economical. I'm talking about there are economical factors here. The economical factor is like there were no jobs in quantum foundations until maybe 10 years ago. There just weren't any. It didn't really exist. People were building quantum computers or something. They were not allowed to do quantum foundations. They were sort of doing it secretly. Gradually over like maybe, I don't know, what's the time scale, Lucian? 10, 15 years? Something like that, right? Not more. I mean, I know what I'm talking about. Lucian knows what I'm talking about because actually both of us actually had some role in this, in the fact that the field actually exists now. So suddenly people could, again, except for philosophy. Philosophy has always been going on. That was the thing. You could do this sort of stuff if you were a philosopher. If you weren't a philosopher, you went to work in a bank or you became a school teacher or that was the end of it. So now things are starting again, so it's like a very slow slope. Like first people actually had to sort of legitimize themselves in whatever jobs they were doing. And I mean, from where I came from, like it was like we had to legitimize ourselves as, do we have any relevance in computer science? I mean, it was, like you said earlier, like gravity, like of course, like that's not the word you could say at that time, but so it was obviously quantum computing, and I think the same, I don't know, like how somebody mentioned how long it took for somebody to get a job in quantum information in the physics department. It took a very long time, like people got jobs in computer science department, like mathematics departments, and like private places and stuff like that, nowhere else. So part of what you are discussing is actually, and the fact that the focus was on non-relativistic stuff, I think was economical. It was about people getting jobs. Now that people actually got their jobs, people do their PhDs, plenty of postdocs available, things are happening, bang, let's go forward. I think that's the situation.
Actually, here I will disagree. I feel that people genuinely were interested in what theoretical, non-relativistic. I would call it, I think what you mean is like quantum theory on a predefined time or causal structure background in some sense. Could be relativistic, I mean it is still the same structure, but when you start talking about quantum gravity, for instance, I believe it may need modification. The others might think something else, but I mean there's more or less standard quantum theory, but I think people were interested in that even without the quantum gravity in view.
I mean, I'm not saying they were not interested. I'm not saying they were not interested, but it's sort of, once you're there, like, you obviously embrace like the future horizons and the future challenges. I'm not saying there's, I mean, I still think there's a lot of stuff to do like in the earlier stage, I agree with you. But you need to have some sort of perspective. You can't, I think for a long time people have been looking at like non-relativistic quantum mechanics and staring at, you need some challenges, like what are, like the discussion and debate about interpretations clearly was going nowhere. I mean, I'm very happy to hear that the Everettian stance has actually pushed people to say, like, we actually have to go into quantum gravity. That's a very constructive sort of result of it. Like, the Bohmians, I don't know where they are, like, I don't know. I mean, you know what I mean, like, I mean, I think that's where your concern comes from being too long in that community, right? Am I right?
Well, it's not a concern exactly, but it's an open question. And look, in a way, of course, it's wonderful to think that it doesn't matter what department you're in. You know, you just do what you're interested in. And of course, that applies to each one of us individually. You do what you want to do, subject to the constraints acting upon you. But from a sociological perspective, funding matters, training matters, what is your community actually does matter. The quantum information community has an obvious exploratory job to do, and it's going to be huge. Quantum computing, I think, is going to be huge, and maybe lots of people in this room are going to be a part of that, and that's a wonderful and amazing thing to be a part of. But I'm just not sure if it warrants the term quantum foundations. You know, the idea that one's doing something fundamental. I'm not sure what that fundamental thing is, unless, following Lucien, for example, it's going to engage quantum concepts with gravity concepts, where we know we've got big unfinished business.
So we could ask Bob this. We could ask. I was actually going to ask at the end of Jamie's talk if the categorical approach is leading us to modifications of quantum theory, or new theories that underlie quantum theory.
It's the whole point. It's like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's the same story as GPTs. Like, it's a generalized formalism where you got more handles and flexibility on doing things. It's the same story. So yes, I mean, you know that.
Well, with GPTs, it's slightly noticeable that hasn't really happened so far. I could point to one or two directions where it might happen.
Yeah, but I think it's the problem of GPT.
well, fine. But you know, I can't point to like a serious theory that, let's say, reproduces the quantum predictions and experiments we've done up till now, but could also be tested against quantum theory in a future experiment. We don't really have anything like that coming from the direction of GPTs at the moment.
Yeah,
I mean, if we're honest, I'm not sure if we do from category theory either. But
well, yeah, we're young, you know. Like GPTs have been around since the 60s of the previous centuries, so we're a bit younger. So we got some time on our hand, you know.
I just wanted to make some comments as somebody that hasn't really spent, I mean, I've not really worked in quantum theory, but a lot of my career has been in aspects of physics, and I'm just trying to kind of formulate what I why I feel uncomfortable about quantum theory. And it's because the other areas of physics that I've worked in, and one is general relativity, my PhD was in general relativity. I worked a lot in fluid mechanics, and I've worked a lot in nonlinear dynamical systems theory. And the underpinning aspects of the bits that I've worked in has been nonlinearity, and the fantastically beautiful and unexpected connections you make when you have a nonlinear theory. Nonlinear dynamics, for example, links with some extraordinary ideas in number theory, but it only works because of nonlinearity. And you kind of, and GR is so beautiful because it's, I don't think anyone would be kind of enamored with GR if it was a linear theory. It's because it's nonlinear that it makes it so attractive and appealing and sort of satisfying somehow. And that's then what I feel grates, you know, when I hear quantum theory being described as a fundamental theory, it kind of grates in my mind, because all these other areas of physics where nonlinearity has shown unexpected and fantastically subtle and beautiful effects, it kind of just doesn't ring true that at a fundamental nature, at a fundamental perspective, a side of physics is at a deep level linear. That just, for me, it doesn't ring true somehow. So clearly at a pragmatic level, quantum theory works well. So there is a sense in which linearity works. But in my view, it's a little bit like the Liouville equation in classical physics is linear, but it says nothing about the underpinning nonlinear dynamics that generates that linear process. So that for me is, which I haven't heard talked about much today, but that for me is the key issue, really, is do we think the linearity of quantum theory is really, and I guess if you're Everettian, you do think it is fundamental, or is it just a veneer for something which actually is at a deeper level, much more non-linear?
I mean, in my understanding of whatever I think, like, I don't even understand the word linear, because I don't have the structure around to even understand that word. So linear and non-linear don't mean anything to me, in the way I'm trying to have been. In my last 10 years of doing, like, whatever I've done, like, those two words don't
well, the
mean...
Schrödinger equation is a linear equation. Okay?
Yeah, but
you can multiply
those
it by
things
a
don't
number,
mean anything to me. Like, I'm trying...
He's not working at the level of PDEs.
Yes, I don't get that stuff. So the word linear doesn't mean anything to me. The word non-linear doesn't even mean anything to me. I mean, of course, I perfectly understand what you're saying, but in the way I'm thinking, those things are not going to play a role in, I mean, I may be totally wrong, but I don't think neither of the linear or the non-linear sort of is going to play any role in I mean, the way I'm thinking about physics, it's not going to even play a role, because it's all about vector space structures and stuff like that. I think those things are going to vanish. I mean, that's a very radical statement, but I don't think, I think 100 years from now, those things are gone.
Linearity directly connected to the superposition principle.
Yeah, well, yeah, but those things are gone. Those things are gone. In 100 years, those things are gone. I mean, we'll be talking different languages.
I mean, look, what has become clear is Bob is 100% in favour of the Saunders motion.
I didn't understand, in 100 years, superpositions or
No, I'm not saying superposition is gone. I'm just saying, like, when you, the words linear, non-linear, that's like a very, very concrete, like, basic mathematical notion. There's nothing to do with physics.
No, tables and chairs are to do with physics. They're very concrete.
No, but linear, like, tables are not linear or non-linear.
Quantum mechanics is the most successful theory in the history of science.
No, I'm talking about the words linear.
I understand.
They are mathematical notions which have nothing to do with the understanding of physics.
Look, it's both a compliment and an insult. You aspiring to a point of view, a perspective on quantum theory in which these words are meaningless to you.
Yeah.
That's both a compliment and an insult.
Okay.
So, okay. Sorry to come back to it, but I'm not sure if any of you answered my question. Which was, how does the debate change in the 21st century if we stop talking about quantum gravity and consider classical gravity? And have any of you considered that? Just cut them off.
I guess the term quantum gravity should be understood in a broad sense, which is just a unified theory, which may not be a quantum gravity theory actually.
The problem is the right-hand side. What is the right-hand side? Come on, it's team you knew. What is that? It's matter. What is matter? Matter is quantum. how to make sense of it. We've all tried, we've racked our brains for decades, those of us, about how on earth to make sense of that, and not been able to come up with a way of making sense of it, other than to go to something like a full-blown quantum theory of gravity.
But if
So I think the best way you can think of it is the way that Adrian was talking about today. Just think of a very heavy double slit experiment or something like that. So if you have something that goes in both directions, how do you source the gravitational field?
so, my experiment.
And that's I don't know. I mean, maybe Adrian wants to say something, but I'm just trying to.
Well, I'd like to understand more about your experiment, Alex. Maybe you can say that.
So what I'm testing is once the gravitational force of an object becomes large enough, superpositions do go here. So the question of what does the gravitational field of a massive superposition look like is no longer a question, because you don't get a massive superposition.
Right, it collapses to one component.
Yeah. And the rate of that decoherence depends on the strength of the gravitational field exerted by the object. And I'm trying to measure a heating rate which is predicted by that theory due to the diffusion of momentum from the position measurements. So in this theory, gravity is the observer, so you don't need a human observer. So my question is, how does the debate change if that theory is true? And it doesn't change? It doesn't change at all? Well, the question of what is the gravitational field of a massive superposition is no longer a question. So the debate has changed.
Yeah, but the question is then how do you go from macroscopic superposition to one terminal superposition? That becomes the question.
Yeah, so that's how the debate changes.
Right.
So that's the
No,
answer.
but that's, in a way, that's always been the debate. One phrasing of the measurement problem is how do you deal with macroscopic superpositions?
Well, my gut feeling would be they don't exist.
Well, I mean that's where we don't know.
I sort of agree with you, but
I mean the things, if interpretation has any role in this century is like coming up with a way to guiding us to at least not unique but possible answers to that and possible theories to that, because there's no answers to that. Current theories don't answer that. Well, do you agree? I don't think
the evidence interpretation embraces it.
What? I don't. No, come on.
The evidence interpretation.
As long as you have like the classical quantum cut or whatever bullshit they have in quantum mechanics. Like
the evidence interpretation. No, I'm saying the evidence interpretation embraces macroscopic superpositions.
Okay.
But
So that's an answer.
if I measure...
So that's where that's where actually you could go wrong.
Oh sure, absolutely.
So if my experiment is successful, does that mean the Everett interpretation is being disproved?
It depends on the details. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Decoherence would probably
you
kick
just
in.
happen to live in a world in which you got this outcome. That's
Oh,
all.
okay, yeah. Everything's fine. You're in your own little world, and you're safe.
So, what happens if this general probabilistic framework happens to be truth in some way, and we find out that quantum theory, you can deduce quantum theory from, I don't know, whatever, from general probabilistic...
General probabilistic framework is not a theory.
Or just not probabilistic,
It doesn't
whatever.
make predictions.
Yeah,
It's
imagine that we find out...
It's a scheme.
It's a scheme, and we find out that you can deduce somehow from postulates quantum theory, whatever.
That happened already.
Yeah, but the question
many different.
The question still remains, right? The question still remains. Why a general probabilistic theory? I mean, the question it doesn't solve anything.
Oh, look, okay, John.
It can go against some arbitrariness, right? In quantum theory, because we don't know why the theory has this stuff, but. Then we have another problem, that is, how can you justify this other theory? I don't know, that's my...
Yeah, maybe actually you can quickly answer to that. I mean, at one point you may discover that gravity is actually a theory of geometry somehow, right? And that's what we discovered.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many things to say about it in addition to that, but somehow it's about geometry and that's it. So if you take that view now serious and see, well, what if it's a GPT? Then you can say, well, if it is in some sense, then it tells it this it is a theory of probability.
And why is the theory of probability?
Pardon?
Why is the theory of probability?
Yes, but you could also ask, why is gravity a theory of geometry? I would say that I don't think that's a fruitful question. It more tells you, it gives you one possible way to look at it, but what you make of it is just a very different question. Right? You may hope that this new view is somehow helpful to do more with it, maybe to unify it with another theory.
But I'm saying that maybe interpretations will not vanish, because in a way maybe we'll continue asking questions about probabilities, and you know what I mean. I don't know if this way of modifying quantum theory will solve anything about interpretations in a way that maybe we'll return there afterwards. I don't know. It's mistaken.
To go back to your remark that nobody is interested in understanding quantum physics, but more in finding a new theory. And this is exactly what yes.
I said what?
You said nobody is interested in understanding physics, but more into changing it.
I didn't say people are interested in understanding. I was saying that can't be the primary goal.
It reminded me very much on Ted Kaczynski's statement in his manifesto. He's known as the Unabomber. This is what he said about science in his times, or in the 80s, 90s. And it was really remarkable that Bob Coecke said the last person he knows who was interested in understanding the world was Kepler. And Kepler actually was coining the word quantum. He was interested in the space which makes the stars behave, move in a certain way. And also he was arguing that this is the same space which is responsible for the quantum and the fluxes. So quantum was introduced in the 16th century in that way. And this leads to the question, would you agree to Kepler that it's enough to have the same space for the macro and the micro world, or are you needing general relativity, like if you speak about quantum gravity, and if you speak about relativity theory, you should also be aware of which kind of general relativity theory. Are you speaking about Einstein, Poincaré, or Whitehead? What role does Whitehead play in this kind of
Whitehead.
Whitehead, Alfred North
Yes,
Whitehead.
I know Alfred North Whitehead, but I didn't know that he had any engagement whatsoever with either relativity or quantum theory.
No, but he has definitely his own relativity theory, which was focusing on Lorentzian.
I'm corrected. I had no idea.
And he was also...
This wasn't in his book Process.
No, but this was a big dispute about relativity between Einstein and Whitehead in his time.
I didn't know.
He was writing at 27, I think. And Whitehead was also making fun of the term C as fundamental. He said you can, instead of the speed of light, you can also take the speed of Saunders. But the main question is, would you be satisfied with the unity with the unification of the macro and micro world with the same geometry of space, or do you need gravity?
I'm sorry, I didn't really get the question. I'm sorry.
No, I brought
Something
this
about
example with
macro and
Kepler.
macro and micro, should they have the same space?
Micro and micro.
Micro and macro, should they have the same space?
Yes.
Yes, well,
Yes, this
I
was
would,
the idea of Kepler, and
yeah, I would say
now
so.
you say.
Yeah, I mean, on Kepler's use of the word quantum, that's new to me, but was he writing in Latin?
Yes, it's
Yeah,
a
well then
quantum
he might
and
have used quantum
fluxus.
just as quantity.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
this is what you use.
Yeah,
quantum physics.
well then they all used quantum, at some point. It would have been just standard terminology to mean quantity.
I don't know anybody else this time who's thought about it.
So I hate to interject there, but maybe we will. So the evening need not end. We have the use of this room until midnight. So anyone who wants to stay and sort of thresh out some quantum foundations, there's plenty of beer left. You're most welcome. But maybe we will sort of officially. Oh wait, okay, no. It's really taking the wind out of myself. No, I was just I was going to suggest we maybe official. Oh, you want to do that?
Yeah.
It's.
It's
hang
your
on.
question.
I think
It's your contribution.
we'll do that afterwards. Let's.
No, come on. Now do it.
Okay. The alternative debate topic, which we didn't go with because it might start too many fights, was what is the worst idea in quantum foundation? But now that I've given that to you, we're going to officially, I think, draw the evening to a close. That can be pursued afterwards. So please join me in thanking, well, 3 of our debaters who graciously entertained us. By all means, please, anyone, if you're willing to stay and you're willing to talk, then please have at it. But
It was a
people
good
who have places
question.
to go
It
to.
was a good question.
But yeah, by all means, let's talk about that. What is the worst idea in quantum mechanics? Why is
What was the rest of the question?
why is it the ever-ready interpretation? But I don't really mean that. I don't really mean that. That was just to be gratuitous.
Can I just see a show of hands for my motion? Who agrees with my motion?
Repeat your motion.
Wait. You have to repeat. That's
The
how
motion
politics
is that the raison d'etre for quantum foundations is to change quantum mechanics.
That, yes.
I'm not qualified
who
to say
disagrees?
anything.
Yeah. So
Interesting. Yeah, it's sort of interesting.
Let's thank Ognyan.